Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing our reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Not taking anything for granted. We're hunkered down here at Govardhan Hill because in the material world anything can happen. So we're stealing some time from the material energy. We can try. We'll keep it going anywhere, somewhere. So we've been reading from the third canto. We're up to chapter 21. And the official statement from Krunasagar is that we're at text number 34. Okay. Well, the sage stood looking up. The Lord left by the pathway leading to Vaikuntha, a path extolled by all great liberated souls. The sage stood listening as the hymns forming the basis of the Samaveda were vibrated by the flapping wings of the Lord's carrier, Garuda. In the Vedic literature, it is stated that the two wings of the transcendental bird Garuda, who carries the Lord everywhere, are two divisions of the Samaveda known as Brihat and Ratantara. Garuda works as the carrier of the Lord. Therefore, he is considered the transcendental prince of all carriers. With his two wings, Garuda began to vibrate the Samaveda, which is chanted by great sages to pacify the Lord. The Lord is worshipped by Brahma, by Lord Śiva, by Garuda, and other demigods with selected poems. And great sages worship him with the hymns of Vedic literatures, such as the Upanishads and Samaveda. These Samaveda utterances are automatically heard by the devotee when another great devotee of the Lord, Garuda, flaps his wings. It is clearly stated here that the sage Kardama began to look to the path by which the Lord was being carried to Vaikuntha. It is thus confirmed that the Lord descends from his abode, Vaikuntha, in the spiritual sky and is carried by Garuda. The path which leads to Vaikuntha is not worshipped. The path which leads to Vaikuntha is not worshipped by the ordinary class of transcendentalists. Only those who are already liberated from material bondage can become devotees of the Lord. Those who are not liberated from material bondage cannot understand transcendental devotional service. In Bhagavad Gita it is clearly stated, Yatatam api siddhanam. There are many persons who are trying to attain perfection by striving for liberation from material bondage. And those who are actually liberated are called Brahma Bhuta or Siddha. Only the Siddhas, or persons liberated from material bondage, can become devotees. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Anyone who is engaged in Krishna consciousness or devotional service is already liberated from the influence of the modes of material nature. Here it is also confirmed that the path of devotional service is worshipped by liberated persons, not the conditioned souls. The conditioned soul cannot understand the devotional service of the Lord. Kardama Muni was a liberated soul who saw the Supreme Lord in person, face to face. There was no doubt that he was liberated, and thus he could see Garuda carrying the Lord on the way to Vaikuntha and hear the flapping of his wings vibrating the sound of Hare Krishna, the essence of the Samaveda. Then, after the departure of the Lord, the worshipful sage Kardama stayed on the bank of Bindu-sarovara, awaiting the time of which the Lord had spoken. Swayambhuva Manu, with his wife, mounted his chariot, which was decorated with golden ornaments. Placing his daughter on it with them, he began traveling all over the earth. Purport: the Emperor Manu, as the great ruler of the world, could have engaged an agent to find a suitable husband for his daughter. But because he loved her just as a father should, he himself left his state on a golden chariot with only his wife to find her a suitable husband. O Vidura, they reached the hermitage of the sage who had just completed his vows of austerity on the very day foretold by the Lord. The holy lake Bindu-sarovara, flooded by the waters of the river Saraswati, was resorted to by hosts of eminent sages. Its holy water was not only auspicious, but as sweet as nectar. It was called Bindu-sarovara because drops of tears had fallen there from the eyes of the Lord, who was overwhelmed by extreme compassion for the sage who had sought his protection. Purport: Kardama underwent austerities to gain the causeless mercy of the Lord, and when the Lord arrived there, he was so compassionate that in pleasure he shed tears. Kardama underwent austerities to gain the causeless mercy of the Lord, and when the Lord arrived there, he was so compassionate that in pleasure he shed tears, which became Bindu-sarovara. Bindu-sarovara, therefore, is worshipped by great sages and learned scholars because, according to the philosophy of the Absolute, the Lord and the tears from his eyes are not different. Just as drops of perspiration which fell from the toe of the Lord became the sacred Ganges, so teardrops from the transcendental eyes of the Lord became Bindu-sarovara. Both are transcendental entities and are worshipped by great sages and scholars. The water of Bindu-sarovara is described here as śivāmṛta jala. Shiva means curing. Anyone who drinks the water of Bindu-sarovara is cured of all material diseases. Similarly, anyone who takes his bath in the Ganges also is relieved of all material diseases. These claims are accepted by great scholars and authorities and are still being acted upon even in this fallen age of Kali. The shore of the lake was surrounded by clusters of pious trees and creepers, rich in fruits and flowers of all seasons, that afforded shelter to pious animals and birds, which uttered various cries. It was adorned by the beauty of groves and forest trees. Purport: it is stated here that Bindu-sarovara was surrounded by pious trees and birds. As there are different classes of men in human society, some pious and virtuous and some impious and sinful, so also among trees and birds there are the pious and the impious. Trees which do not bear nice fruit or flowers are considered impious. The birds which are very nasty, such as crows, are considered impious. In the land surrounding Bindu-sarovara, there was not a single impious bird or tree. Every tree bore fruits and flowers, and every bird sang the glories of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The area resounded with the notes of overjoyed birds. Intoxicated bees wandered there, intoxicated peacocks proudly danced, and merry cuckoos called one another. The beauty of the pleasant sounds heard in the area surrounding Lake Bindu-sarovara is described here. After drinking honey, the black beads became maddened, and they hummed in intoxication. Merry peacocks danced just like actors and actresses, and merry cuckoos called their mates very nicely. Lake Bindu-sarovara was adorned by flowering trees such as Kardama, Champak, Ashok, Karanja, Bakula, Asana, Kunda, Mandara, Kurtaja, and young mango trees. The air was filled with the pleasing notes of Karandava, ducks, plovers, swans, ospreys, waterfowl, cranes, chakravakas, and chakoras. Purport: for most of the trees, flowers, fruits, and birds mentioned here as surrounding Bindu-sarovara Lake, English synonym cannot be found. All the trees mentioned are very pious in that they produce a nice aromatic flower, such as the Champak, Kardama, and Bakula. The sweet sounds of waterfowl and cranes made the surrounding area as pleasant as possible and created a very suitable spiritual atmosphere. Its shores abounded with deer, boars, porcupines, gavayas, elephants, baboons, lions, monkeys, mongooses, and musk deer. Musk deer are not found in every forest, but only in places like Bindu-sarovara. They are always intoxicated by the aroma of musk secreted from their navels. Gavayas, the species of cow mentioned here bear a bunch of hair at the end of their tails. This bunch of hair is used in temple worship to fan the deities. Gavayas are sometimes called chamaris, and they are considered very sacred. In India, there are still gypsies or forest mercantile people who flourish by trading kasturi or musk and the bunches of hair from the chamaris. They are always in great demand. These are always in great demand for the higher classes of Hindu population, and such business still goes on in large cities and villages in India. Entering that most sacred spot with his daughter and going near the sage, the first monarch, Swayambhuva Manu, saw the sage sitting in his hermitage, having just propitiated the sacred fire by pouring oblations into it. His body shone most brilliantly, though he had engaged in austere penance for a long time. He was not emaciated, for the Lord had cast his affectionate sidelong glance upon him, and he had also heard the nectar flowing from the moon-like words of the Lord. The sage was tall, his eyes were large, like the petals of a lotus, and he had matted locks on his head. He was clad in rags. Swayambhuva Manu approached and saw him to be somewhat soiled like an unpolished gem. Purport: here are some descriptions of a brahmachari yogi. In the morning, the first duty of a brahmachari seeking spiritual elevation is hutashana, to offer sacrificial oblations to the Supreme Lord. Those engaged in brahmacharya cannot sleep until 7 or 9 o'clock in the morning. They must rise early in the morning, at least 1.5 hours before the sun rises, and offer oblations. Or, in this age, they must chant the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, as referred to by Lord Chaitanya, Kalau nastyeva 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 gatiranyata. There's no other alternative in this age to chanting the holy name of the Lord. The brahmachari must rise early in the morning and, after placing himself, should chant the holy name of the Lord. From the very features of the sage, it appeared that he had undergone great austerities. That is a sign of one observing brahmacharya, the vow of celibacy. If one lives otherwise, it will be manifest in the lust visible in his face and body. The word vidyotamanam indicates that the brahmachari feature showed in his body. That is the certificate that one has undergone great austerity in yoga. A drunkard or smoker or sex-monger can never be eligible to practice yoga. Generally, yogis look very skinny because of their not being comfortably situated. But Kardama Muni was not emaciated, for he had seen the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Here the word snigdha pangavo lokanat means that he was fortunate enough to see the Supreme Lord face to face. He looked healthy because he had directly received the nectarian sound vibrations from the lotus lips of the Personality of Godhead. Similarly, one who hears the transcendental sound vibration of the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, also improves in health. We have actually seen that many brahmacharis and grahastas connected with the International Society for Krishna Consciousness have improved in health, and a luster has come to their faces. It is essential that a brahmachari engaged in spiritual advancement look very healthy and lustrous. The comparison of the sage to an unpolished gem is very appropriate. Even if a gem just taken from a mine looks unpolished, the luster of the gem cannot be stopped. Similarly, although Kardama was not properly dressed and his body was not properly cleansed, his overall appearance was gem-like. Seeing that the monarch had come to his hermitage and was bowing before him, the sage greeted him with benediction and received him with due honor. Purport: Emperor Swayambhuva Manu not only approached the cottage of dried leaves possessed by the hermit Kardama, but also offered respectful obeisances unto him. Similarly, it was the duty of the hermit to offer blessings to kings who used to approach his hermitage in the jungle. After receiving the sage's attention, the king sat down and was silent. Recalling the instructions of the Lord, Kardama then spoke to the king as follows, delighting him with his sweet accents. The tour you have undertaken, O Lord, is surely intended to protect the virtuous and kill the demons, since you embody the protecting energy of Sri Hari. It appears from many Vedic literatures, especially histories like Srimad Bhagavatam and the Puranas, that the pious kings of old used to tour their kingdoms in order to give protection to the pious citizens and to chastise or kill the impious. Sometimes they used to kill animals in the forest to practice the killing art because, without such practice, they would not be able to kill the undesirable elements. Kshatriyas are allowed to commit violence in that way because violence for a good purpose is a part of their duty. Here, two terms are clearly mentioned, Vardaya, for the purpose of killing, and Asatam, those who are undesirable. The protecting energy of the king is supposed to be the energy of the Supreme Lord. In Bhagavad Gita 4:8, the Lord says, Parityanaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam. The Lord descends to give protection to the pious and to kill the demons. The potency, therefore, to give protection to the pious and kill the demons or undesirables is directly an energy from the Supreme Lord, and the king or the chief executive of the state is supposed to possess such energy. In this age, it is very difficult to find such a head of state who is expert in killing the undesirables. Modern heads of state sit very nicely in their palaces and try without reason to kill innocent persons. You assume, when necessary, the part of the sun god, the moon god, Agni, the god of fire, Indra, the lord of paradise, Vayu, the wind god, Yama, the god of punishment, Dharma, the god of piety, and Varuna, the god presiding over the waters. All obeisances unto you, who are none other than Lord Vishnu. Since sage Kardama was a Brahmana and Swayambhuva was a Kshatriya, the sage was not supposed to offer obeisances to the king because socially his position was greater than the king's. But he offered his obeisances to Swayambhuva Manu because as Manu, king and emperor, he was the representative of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is always worshipable, regardless of whether one is a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, or a Shudra. As the representative of the Supreme Lord, the king deserved respectful obeisances from everyone. If you did not mount your victorious jeweled chariot, whose mere presence threatens culprits, if you did not produce fierce sounds by the twanging of your bow, and if you did not roam about the world like the brilliant sun, leading a huge army whose trampling feet caused the globe of the earth to tremble, then all the moral laws governing the Varnas and ashramas created by the Lord himself would be broken by the rogues and rascals. Purport is the duty of a responsible king to protect the social and spiritual orders in human society. The spiritual orders are divided into 4 ashramas: Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. And the social orders, according to work and qualification, are made up of the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. These social orders, according to the different grades of work and qualification, are described in Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, for want of proper protection by reasonable kings, the system of social and spiritual orders has now become a hereditary caste system. But this is not the actual system. Human society means that society which is making progress towards spiritual realization. The most advanced human society was known as Arya. Arya refers to those who are advancing. So the question is, which society is advancing? Advancement does not mean creating material necessities unnecessarily and thus wasting human energy in aggravation over so-called material comforts. Real advancement is advancement towards spiritual realization, and the community which acted towards this end was known as the Aryan civilization. The intelligent men, the Brahmanas, as exemplified by Kardama Muni, were engaged in advancing the spiritual cause. And Kshatriyas, like Emperor Swayambhuva, used to rule the country and ensure that all facilities for spiritual realization were nicely provided. It is the duty of the king to travel all over the country and see that everything is in order. Indian civilization, on the basis of the 4 varnas and ashramas, deteriorated because of her dependency on foreigners, or those who did not follow the civilizations of varnashrama. Thus, the varnashrama system has now been degraded into the caste system. The institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas is confirmed herewith to be Bhagavad Rachita, which means designed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, this is also confirmed. Chaturvarnyam vayashrishtam. The Lord says that the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas is created by me. Anything created by the Lord cannot be closed or covered. The divisions of varnas and ashramas will continue to exist, either in their original form or in degraded form, but because they are created by the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they cannot be extinguished. They are like the sun, a creation of God, and therefore will remain either covered by clouds or in a clear sky. The sun will continue to exist. Similarly, when the varnashrama system becomes degraded, it appears as a hereditary caste system. But in every society there is an intelligent class of men, a martial class, a mercantile class, and a laborer class. When they are regulated for cooperation among communities according to the Vedic principles, then there is peace and spiritual advancement. But when there is hatred and malpractice and mutual mistrust in the caste system, the whole system becomes degraded, and as stated herein, it creates a deplorable state. At the present moment, the entire world is in this deplorable condition because of giving rights to so many interests. This is due to the degradation of the 4 castes of varnas and ashramas. 55. If you gave up all thought of the world's situation, unrighteousness would flourish, for men who hanker only after money would be unopposed. Such miscreants would attack, and the world would perish. Because the scientific division of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas is now being extinguished, the entire world is being governed by unwanted men who have no training in religion, politics, or social order. And it is a very deplorable condition. In the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas, there are regular training principles for the different classes of men. Just as in the modern age there is a necessity for engineers, medical practitioners, and electricians, and they are properly trained in different scientific institutions. Similarly, in former times, the higher social orders, namely in the intelligent class, the Brahmanas, the ruling class, the Kshatriyas, and the mercantile class, the Vaishyas, were properly trained. Bhagavad Gita describes the duties of the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. When there is no such training, one simply claims that because he is born in a Brahmana or Kshatriya family, he is therefore a Brahmana or a Kshatriya, even though he performs the duties of a Shudra. Such undue claims to being a higher caste man make the system of scientific social orders into a caste system, completely degrading the original system. Thus society is now in chaos, and there is neither peace nor prosperity. It is clearly stated herein that unless there is the vigilance of a strong king, impious, unqualified men will claim a certain status in society, and that will make the social order perish. In spite of all this, I ask you, O valiant king, the purpose for which you have come here. Whatever it may be, we shall carry it out without reservation. Purport: when a guest comes to a friend's house, it is understood that there is some special purpose. Kardama Muni could understand that such a great king as Swayambhuva, although traveling to inspect the condition of his kingdom, must have had some special purpose to come to his hermitage. Thus he prepared himself to fulfill the king's desire. Formerly it was customary that the sages used to go to the kings, and the kings used to visit the sages in their hermitages. Each was glad to fulfill the other's purpose. This reciprocal relationship is called bhakti karya. There is a nice verse describing the relationship of mutual beneficial interest between the Brahmana and the Kshatriya. Kshatram dvijatvam. Kshatra means the royal order, and dvijatvam means the Brahminical order. The two were meant for mutual interest. The royal order would give protection to the Brahmanas for the cultivation of spiritual advancement in society, and the Brahmanas would give their valuable instruction to the royal order on how the state and the citizens can gradually be elevated in spiritual perfection. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 21st chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Conversation between Manu and Kardama. Jaya, Jaya, victory, victory. Let's see if there's any reflections or questions here on this first day of November. Right? Okay. We have one outside, one inside so far, two outside, and one inside. Outside? Go ahead. Who raised their hand? Prabhupada Priya, go ahead.
Hare Krishna. I just thought it was so sweet how when the Lord came, he was crying tears of happiness just to be with his devotee who had called for him and turned to him and taken shelter and done his best to please him, even though he had material desires. Because sometimes as devotees we get down on ourselves. We can be a little bit hard on ourselves when we have material desires and think, oh, I should just repress this, try to forget about it, and pray purely to the Lord that all I want is pure devotional service and just, hope that thing goes away or whatever, or pursue it separately. But it just shows how, one of the 64 qualities of the Lord is that he's grateful. And one of the things that he seems to be very grateful for is our just turning to him, just putting our attention on him for whatever reason, somehow or other, just thinking of him. And that makes him very happy.
What a great point. Very reassuring and helpful. Thank you very much, Prabhupada Priya. Really appreciate it. Okay, we have one inside now.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I just have a question, and it's based on the observation that in the 44, or 45 and 47 verse there is a description how Kardama Muni was looked like after meeting of Swayambhuva Manu, and it's just a bodily description, but it is said his body shone most brilliantly, though he had engaged in austerity penance for a long time. He was not emaciated, for the Lord had cast his affection and sidelong glance upon him. And so sometimes, there is a question I have, at least I heard many times different opinions, like, for example, the grandfather of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I guess many of you heard the story that he was very powerful, kind of a yogi. He ate only once at night, and all day long he was chanting Hare Krishna, going out, taking some snakes, killing the snakes. And so he was very powerful physically. And in the end of his life, he left this world by his own power, like a yogi, through the Brahmarandra. So and here is also some bodily explanations are there that seemingly like a sign of the spiritual containment. So is it like that, or sometimes we see
Containment, did you say?
Yeah, like he was a spiritual person. That's why he was not emaciated from the long tapasya, and he was very lustrous, right, and blissful. I mean,
Yeah.
so can we say that? Can we put our faith kind of into this, that some person who is really advanced, like we saw many elevated souls who left the body just because of the disease or something like that. We didn't see maybe that much special miracles, or what to say, like.
You finished your question, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I know it's hard to finish questions. Well, the directive is drishtaisa bhava janitarva pushashta doshar. Drishtaisa bhava janitarva pushashta doshar na prakritafa miha bhaktya danasya pashyat gangam nasam nakalabud buddhapena pankar brahma dravapam apagachiti niradharmai. And that is that Rupa Goswami gives this directive that we don't consider the physical stature of the Vaishnava. There are notable exceptions. There's Madhvacharya, there's the ones you mentioned, and so forth. But it's not an absolute rule. That's why there's this idea, drishtraisa bhava janitarva pushashcha doshar. The vapu may have some fault. Na prakritafamya bhaktya danasya pashyat. But in the body of a devotee, it's not considered. Rather, one sees it, gangam nasam nakadabud buddhapayana pankar, just as the Ganges is always pure. But sometimes it has bubbles, foam, and mud. So, the body of a pure devotee may appear to be infirm, may look like an infirm body, may even be a distorted body, but that's not a consideration. It's as I mentioned the other day, there's only two considerations. One is the merciful vibrations that come from the mouth of the devotee and the steadiness of the devotee. Let's see. I'll do one outside and they'll come back. Somebody's got to keep track because I don't know who's raising their hand at what time. It's not like Zoom where you can keep track. Okay, Mahendra Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Did you finish your meetings?
No, 6:30 is another one.
Oh my God. Okay, go ahead.
I was struck by this sentence that when Prabhupada explains that the kings and sages visited each other and they were very glad to fulfill each other's purpose, and this is a reciprocal relationship.
Keep that mic close.
Reciprocal relationship. So, and previously also, Prabhupada mentioned how that respect, mutual respect between different classes and devotees, he said, at least the very minimum is offering sweet words. A few times he mentioned sweet words. And when Krishna is in the center, that was in some chapters ago, there will be guaranteed harmony in the society. So I was just thinking, this seems to be, now it's close, but at least we don't hear. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's the essence of Varnashrama is so much also about relationships and sweetness of these relationships. But I was just wondering why in our society, in ISKCON, there's so much dissension and lack of sweet words. On the opposite, there's so much fighting for all kinds of different reasons and different positions. And everyone seems to defend and say, no, Krishna is in the center, we're doing it for Krishna. But somehow there is no harmony.
That's just on the internet. If you avoid the internet, then everything's fine.
You'll see the harmony. Yes.
Life seems great. Well, yeah, there's natural dissension amongst human beings. That's what they like to do, is argue. But there's also lots of decorum and beautiful interactions between devotees. I mean, I see it all the time. When we went over to the GRC at the beginning of this yajna, we were just having our program in a little room on the side there, and Burijan Prabhu came all the way out of his program just to walk in and offer appreciation that we were there. And I see such things amongst devotees who are cultured or whether they're senior or junior, if they're under good guidance and they're getting trained properly, then they learn the Vaishnava etiquette. And that's the jewel of the Vaishnava, said Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you go to a community where there's some leadership and that's inculcated, then you feel a completely different environment and atmosphere. And so it's not that it's not there. It's definitely there, but it can always be encouraged in other areas too. I always encourage devotees to be careful about places where the mode is unhinged, in the sense that people have forgotten the importance of the etiquette. We can remember the Daksha Yajna and what kind of destruction that led to when the devotees there assembled for an honorable purpose then became forgetful of how important it was to treat each other with respect. Then later, seemed to, after the carnage, everyone calmed down again. It's better just to preemptively be like that. You're like that. You're a consummate gentleman. Everywhere you go, the way you conduct yourself. So my prayer is more people could be like you. Don't mind. Devavrata.
Just back to this, just there, swabhava jaditar vapupasta jostar. I've noticed in myself, it can be quite easy to overlook the physical discrepancies, grossly manifested, infirmed bodily, but one of the words which appears there, which I've only kind of thought about in the last year or two, is this word swabhava, which means one could have a rough disposition. And that's not always easy to overlook, because the person's engaging in devotional service, but they're a little bit rough, maybe a little bit grouchy, but they're doing their service sincerely, but that's not always easy to overlook, whereas if someone's diseased, has some type of physical illness, you can kind of get past it, but when someone's subtle disposition is a particular way, it's not always easy. Do you have any guidance on how to elevate our consciousness?
You need insider information. Because oftentimes people, you think they're really gruff, and then you can ask, well, what's with that devotee? And they say, no, he's actually really nice. You just got to get to know him. Or they'll tell you the redeeming qualities. That's always helpful. Just as how it's not helpful when you hear pernicious criticism of devotees, because that kind of sticks in your head, and then it's really much harder to appreciate devotees when you see them. But when you do find out, oh yeah, that's how he is. He's like that. He's just kidding. Or like, yeah, we can name. In fact, I've joked about making a coffee table book of the great characters of ISKCON. We've known our share of characters who, I could say one of my closest friends and allies in Krishna consciousness, who unfortunately passed a couple of years ago, was a devotee who I had very little in common with as far as our culture and the way we went about things. Divyanga is just cracking up because it's thinking of all the contrasts. I mean, I used to live with them and travel with them and stuff like that, and in so many ways we were just totally the odd couple. But we knew him as inside his inner workings. He was so loyal to Prabhupada, and he was just such a diehard when it came to his service. He wasn't ill-motivated at all, even though you could find a million things about him to say, is he a barbarian or what? And there's plenty like that. But if you know who they are and you've been with them and you've seen what their mettle is, then you have the sense of just Vaisabhava. Even the Swabhava is, okay, yeah, it's not a big thing. And Prabhupada overlooked it so many times. He looked for alacrity. He wanted to see that people were enthusiastic, and he didn't care about the rough stuff on the outside so much at all. That's contradictory. There's a way he didn't consider that, because you can see people who he appointed to high positions and even trusted with his will and all kinds of stuff, who many people say, that guy? But Prabhupada saw, he would look beyond that and see what their devotional attitude was and what they were actually doing. And that does, anyway, there's more that could be said about that. One outside, near Akula?
Just more along the line of what you were...
Pardon me?
More along the line of what you were just saying. Myself, I can think of two devotees, two god sisters, who I was petrified of because of their personalities and how they communicated and all. But over the years, those same qualities kind of became endearing. It was who they are. And like you said, I think your mom had what did she call them? Someone who was rough on the outside and someone they were really soft on the inside.
Muffins, I think.
Yeah, something like that. So I've had that experience also. Crispy
on the outside, soft on the inside. The muffins. Okay. Radhakripa, he can have as many chances as he wants because he's leaving tomorrow. Feel free to raise your hand all you want tonight. Half hour, as much as you like.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I just happened to, when I was going after lunch, I saw Sarvabhauma Prabhu walking to his room, and he was happily chanting. It was just like, I wish I could just follow him and hearing that. And I just stopped to say him that what you shared actually about him, that he trained you in the book distribution, and he was such a great warrior, and how his score was all high. When I shared him, he said that, oh no, Vash is very generous and too sweet. So what I felt like, when I'm sharing with him, this sweet exchange about when you shared with us about his, Star Wars, being your first in the pointer in the book distribution about, then I was connecting back that when you say that you never lose credit, when the credit, you give the due credit to someone who accepts it. So it was so sweet when he said that he's so generous and sweet. So when I see this sweetness, it feels like I'm at the right spot. Thank you, Maharaj.
When there's dealings between Vaishnavas, and especially we find when there's genuine loving dealings between senior Vaishnavas, then the whole that are visible, the whole community develops a sense, okay, Krishna consciousness works. Because generally siblings fight or have a sense of competition, or the emotion that rules the world mostly is envy. And when people see that there is deep love between God brothers, God sisters, especially ones that have been around for a long time together, then it's palpable that the devotees naturally feel faith. Okay, the process works, because you can't do that artificially. Yes, online. Pargarangi? Yay!
So it's a reflection, Maharaj. I like the comparison of the Varnashrama system with the sun. It was mentioned that because they are created by the Lord, they will exist in some way, and as was mentioned in the purport, they cannot be extinguished.
Yeah, it can be a cloudy day, but because it's the Lord's system, it's always there. Okay, outside people's party? No? Inside people's party? Nope. Okay. Narada Muni.
I have a question building on Deva Ratapuru's question.
Mm-hmm.
And these Buddha, these bubbles that are the foam of the Ganges, sometimes the false ego sees these things as an ill-motivated action. It's kind of like I play like a victim, someone who might have some type of different psychophysical nature than me might approach me and say something to me in a way that rubs me the wrong way. And I might feel that that person is ill-motivated. How do I decipher between, is that me just being like envious or, expecting some sort of respect? Or is there actually some substance to utilizing, intelligence to say maybe this person had an ill intent? Am I in the right position to think that way?
There's no use in thinking about it until you can investigate and find out. I mentioned this early on. The entire legal system, I'll make an outrageous statement. Every legal system in every country of the world has one objective, and that's to discern motive. And motive is what determines how we relate to people. And it's most effective to try to discover what the motive is. No need to think about it, and it's always best to give people the benefit of the doubt that they didn't mean to do it. But if you find out that they did, then you can do due diligence. And the best way to find out is to learn how to talk to people and ask them, why are you such a jerk? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Talk to them and try to find out what the motivation is. You can always ask them. Sometimes there's this sense of you think somebody doesn't like you, and then you talk to them and it's like, no, I have no sense of that at all. I actually really like you. It's just we misinterpret the way they presented it. Or if there is some issue, then you can talk about it and say, and they'll want to discover your motive, because if they have an ill motive towards you, oftentimes it's because they thought you had an ill motive. I've seen in management, there's these Mexican, is that racist to say Mexican standoff? I should just say there was a standoff. Huh? What? A what? It was kung fu fighting all day long. Now, sometimes there's a standoff where parties don't talk to each other for a long period of time. And then somehow or other, somebody has the common sense to say, why don't we get together and talk about it? And once the parties come into the room, everyone's like, well, what's the real problem here? It's like, no, nothing really. And at least, I've been part of a few mediations before. Allah, what's the ISKCON Resolve? Who they're supposed to answer the phone. ISKCON Resolve, get over it. And no, I've been to ones would legitimately, there were definitely two sides to that, and that had been going on for a long time. And I found that the devotees, when they got together, during the official mediation, there was definitely tension. But then afterwards, during prasadam, when everyone sat down together, it was as if nothing ever happened. And, do you like pakoras, or do you like salad, or it's just, and there was a way in which, by getting together and talking, although a lot of it was agree to disagree, there was a sense of I know you, you know me, and there wasn't that chasm that's caused by assuming that you know what people think of you, and them assuming what you think of them. So one of the most important works in any community is to establish a way that this kind of communication can take place on a regular basis. Om Tat Sat. Any other points? Yes? We gave you carte blanche. Help yourself.
Maharaj, I was reflecting when Harmandir was here. So on the very first day, we thought he usually go to the parikrama in the morning, and I know he's very young as compared to me, so I just thought I'll follow him. But then when I was following him to start the yatra, he exactly stopped at the places where you stop. He exactly prayed where we started the prayer from beginning, and 2 or 3 places. Now my life is very simple, so I don't need to think about what is Pushri's lota is, what other details, and I know you exactly where you go. So I think what I was appreciating with Mukharvinda is he's fixated in his mind about what is in your heart, and he's just following that one. And then I got a glimpse of that, even though I didn't get a chance in previous years to do the yatra with you. So I feel like I have done the same yatra, because now I know where you stop, what you like. And now when even tomorrow, if I take my relatives, sisters and brothers, I'll only stop at that location. So my life is very simple. So I just wanted to appreciate Mukharvinda in his absence. Because of him, I learned background things which I would have not known otherwise.
Thank you. It was deeply touching, and we're definitely missing Mukharvinda. It's just not the same. Thank you. Okay, we're back at it. We have a few more minutes to go, and we're starting a new chapter. And this chapter is entitled The Marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. It happens to be chapter 22. Sri Maitreya said, after describing the greatness of the emperor's manifold qualities and activities, the sage became silent, and the emperor, feeling modesty, addressed him as follows. Manu replied, to expand himself in Vedic knowledge, Lord Brahma, the personified Veda, from his face created you, the Brahmanas, who are full of austerity, knowledge, and mystic power, and are averse to sense gratification. Purport, the purpose of the Vedas is to propagate the transcendental knowledge of the Absolute Truth. The Brahmanas were created from the mouth of the Supreme Person, and therefore they are meant to spread the knowledge of the Vedas in order to spread the glories of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita also, Lord Krishna says that all the Vedas are meant for understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is especially mentioned here, Yoga Yuktan Alam Patan, that Brahmanas are full of mystic power and are completely averse to sense gratification. Actually, there are 2 kinds of occupations. One occupation in the material world is sense gratification, and the other occupation is spiritual activity, to satisfy the Lord by his glorification. Those who engage in sense gratification are called demons, and those who spread the glorification of the Lord or satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord are called demigods. It is specifically mentioned here that the Brahmanas are created from the face of the cosmic personality, or Virat Purusha. Similarly, the Kshatriyas are said to be created from his arms. The Vaishyas are created from his waist, and the Shudras are created from his legs. The Brahmanas are especially meant for austerity, learning and knowledge, and are averse to all kinds of sense gratification. For the protection of the Brahmanas, the 1,000-legged Supreme Being created us, the Kshatriyas, from his 1,000 arms. Hence, the Brahmins are said to be his heart and the Kshatriyas his arms. Kshatriyas are specifically meant to maintain the Brahmanas because if the Brahmanas are protected, then the head of civilization is protected. Brahmanas are supposed to be the head of the social body. If the head is clear and has not gone mad, then everything is in proper position. The Lord is described thus, Namo Brahmanya Devaya Gomramana Hitaya Cha. The purport of this prayer is that the Lord specifically protects the Brahmanas and the cows, and then he protects all other members of society, Jagat Jitaya. It is his will that universal welfare work depends on the protection of cows and Brahmanas. Thus, Brahminical culture and cow protection are the basic principles for human civilization. Kshatriyas are especially meant to protect the Brahmanas, as is the supreme will of the Lord. Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha. As within the body, the heart is a very important part, so the Brahmanas are also the important element in human society. The Kshatriyas are more like the whole body. Even though the whole body is bigger than the heart is more important. That is why the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas protect each other as well as themselves, and the Lord himself, who is both the cause and effect and is yet immutable, protects them through each other. The entire social structure of Varna and Ashram is a cooperative system meant to uplift all to the highest platform of spiritual realization. Everyone okay? The Brahmanas are intended to be protected by the Kshatriyas, and the Kshatriyas are intended to be enlightened by the Brahmanas. When the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas cooperate nicely, the other subordinate divisions, the Vaishyas or mercantile people, and the Shudras or laborer class automatically flourish. The entire elaborate system of Vedic society was therefore based on the importance of the Brahmins and Kshatriyas. The Lord is the real protector, but he is unattached to the affairs of protection. He creates Brahmanas for the protection of the Kshatriyas, and Kshatriyas for the protection of the Brahmanas. He remains aloof from all activities, therefore he is called nirvikara, without activity. He has nothing to do. He is so great that he does not perform action personally, but his energies act. The Brahmanas and Kshatriyas in anything that we see are different energies acting upon one another. Although individual souls are all different, the super self or super soul is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Individually, one's self may differ from others in certain qualities and may engage in different activities, such as those of a Brahmin, Kshatriya, or Vaishya. But when there is complete cooperation among different individual souls, the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Super Soul, Paramatma, being one in every individual soul, is pleased and gives them all protection. As stated before, the Brahmanas are produced from the mouth of the Lord, and the Kshatriyas are produced from the chest or arms of the Lord. If the different castes or social sections, although apparently differently occupied in different activities, nevertheless act in full cooperation, then the Lord is pleased. This is the idea of the institution of 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. If the members of different Ashramas and Varnas cooperate fully in Krishna consciousness, then society is well protected by the Lord without doubt. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that the Lord is the proprietor of all different bodies. The individual soul is the proprietor of his individual body, but the Lord clearly states, "My dear Bharata, you must know that I am also a Kshetragya." Kshetragya means the knower or proprietor of the body. The individual soul is the proprietor of the individual body, but the super soul, the personality of Godhead Krishna, is the proprietor of all bodies everywhere. He is the proprietor not only of human bodies, but of birds, beasts, and all other entities, not only on this planet, but on other planets also. He is the supreme proprietor, therefore he does not become divided by protecting the different individual souls. He remains one and the same. That the sun appears on top of everyone's head when at the meridian does not imply that the sun becomes divided. One man thinks that the sun is on his head only, whereas 5,000 miles away another man is thinking that the sun is only on his head. Similarly, the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is one, but he appears to individually oversee each individual soul. This does not mean that the individual soul and the Supersoul are one. They are one in quality as Spirit Soul, but the individual soul and Supersoul are different. How many times do you think we've heard that since we started? It's so important, isn't it? Now I have resolved all my doubts simply by meeting you, for your Lordship has very kindly and clearly explained the duty of a king who desires to protect his subjects. Because when Prabhupada came to America, and even now, the impersonalist idea is so pervasive. And he was nirvishe shunyavadi paschatya deshatarane. There was a way in which he came to do battle with those errant philosophies. And he made sure, it seems, that there's not a purport anywhere that if somebody only read one purport randomly, they wouldn't get the message. Did I read the translation already? Yes. Thank you. Manu described herewith the result of seeing a great saintly person. Lord Chaitanya says that one should always try to associate with saintly persons, because if one establishes a proper association with a saintly person, even for a moment, one attains all perfection. Somehow or other, if one meets a saintly person or achieves his favor, then the entire mission of one's human life is fulfilled. In our personal experience, we have actual proof of this statement of Manu. Once we had the opportunity to meet Vishnupad Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, and on first sight he requested this humble self to preach his message in the Western countries. There was no preparation for this, but somehow or other he desired it, and by his grace we are now engaged in executing his order, which has given us a transcendental occupation, and has saved and liberated us from the occupation of material activities. Thus it is actually a fact that if one meets a saintly person completely engaged in transcendental duties and achieves his favor, then one's life's mission becomes complete. What is not possible to achieve in thousands of lives can be achieved in one moment if there is an opportunity to meet a saintly person. It is therefore enjoined in Vedic literature that one should always try to associate with saintly persons and try to disassociate oneself from the common man, because by one word of a saintly person, one can be liberated from material entanglement. A saintly person has the power, because of his spiritual advancement, to give immediate liberation to the conditioned soul. Here Manu admits that all his doubts are now over, because Kardama has very kindly described the different duties of individual souls. Wow. That's a good note to end on. Of course, we never want to end. But what are your impressions? It's like people go to opium dens and they just lie there and they smoke opium and go into a stupor. The transcendental counterpart of that is go in a room and just hear Bhagavatam and don't come out. Where'd they go? In that room. They're not coming out. Yes. You got 30 seconds.
I was just feeling that it just feels like yesterday or day before you were saying we have 33 chapters and now we already finished 22.
How did it happen? It's by chance. It just happened by accident. You had a point? Yeah. We don't know how it happened.
Today in our Bhakti Shastri class in the morning, we were reading from Nectar of Devotion, and we were reading the part where it is mentioned that how during the month of Kartik, if one gets the opportunity to spend even few seconds in the Mathura or like Mathura district, then the whole life can be perfected, and one should take the opportunity to hear Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, like that. And I was thinking this is such a great opportunity that Krishna has provided through all the devotees here, that
It's a
nothing
whole
can be more
different
better.
lifestyle. It's most people are running around mad trying to accumulate wealth, which is a complete waste of time. Tasyaiva hetu prayate takovido, etc. But those who become greedy for spiritual assets, they run all over the place, all over the planet, just finding where it is that you get the insider seat to hear, to chant, to be in the right place at the right time. That's an exciting life. Devrata.
I was fortunate to be out front yesterday when you were addressing, I think it was Vedasar Prabhu's group, and you were mentioning how when we're in the Dham just hearing Bhagavatam, when you kind of start to exit the Dham, you're like, oh, all this is still going on. And it really just unplugs us from practically everything that's going on out there. It's a completely different vibration, completely different atmosphere. And we're just basically staying within these four walls. I remember Ayendra Prabhu used to say that Prabhupada would say that everything's in the four walls of the Krishna Balaram Mandir.
Yeah.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. I remember I used to spend 3 months a year going to the Dhams, and then sometimes once I spent a whole month in Mayapur. I didn't walk out the gate even once. I just stayed in there. And I remember walking out and thinking, hey, wait a minute. There's a whole world out here. And what to speak of going to the Dhams? You just go from one to the next. And then the whole world just seems like a Dham. And then I remember flying into Kennedy Airport and just like, whoa, what happened to these people? Oh God. Yeah.
I remember you saying that just reminded me of being on traveling Sankirtan with Brigupati Prabhu. We had one of those days where we just kept hitting like a brick wall. We wanted to go out, but we'd get kicked out. Something didn't work. Tire would blow out, and we just couldn't get on, just hit the pavement and do Sankirtan. And we were sitting in the parking lot, and Brigupati goes, haven't all these people figured out they're all in Maya yet? And we distributed it on books to all of them.
Well, okay, last point. Prabhupada Priya, go ahead.
Hare Krishna. I really liked the 22.4 purport, where Srila Prabhupada, like at least 3 times, he talks about the need for cooperation between the different, the varnas.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that it's not that, it's not that everyone's the same. Everyone has their different, psychophysical natures, their different occupations and things, but or their position in the hierarchy. But it's just a question of getting along, like having a positive view of each other. And I was thinking of, in terms of seniors and juniors and peers, the way in material circles, if someone is your junior, then the tendency will be to exploit them. If someone's your peer, the tendency will be to compete, and if someone's your senior, the tendency will be to envy them. But in spiritual consciousness, if someone's your junior, then you'll want to give mercy to them and be kind and compassionate to them. If someone's your peer, then you want to befriend them, support them. And if someone is your senior, then you want to serve them, assist them in some way. So it's just a question of, shifting the consciousness from material to spiritual, and we can easily cooperate and have nice relationships. And Prabhupada says that the result, he says it like at least twice. Whenever he talks about cooperation, he says that when the members of the different groups cooperate fully, then they'll be protected. He says at one place, he says the whole society will be protected by the Lord without a doubt if we can just cooperate with each other. And after all, the different varnas are like parts of the body. So, it's within the best interest of the whole if the parts of the body cooperate. So it's just a shame that, it's so difficult. There's so many obstacles to cooperation. Such a no-brainer in one sense, but in practical sense, it's like almost one of the most difficult things.
Yeah, Prabhu pointed out in his book about Prabhupada that Prabhupada considered cooperation synonymous with bhakti. Because being an individual soul, we're a little sample of the Supreme Controller. So we have those tendencies. And when you put unlimited asankhya souls together, you get a natural competition. And I think Rodney King said it best all those years ago. Can't we just get along? I got to stop it. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Radha Govinda, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, 18 Thakur. If you so desire, please instill in our hearts the desire to cooperate with devotees. Please let us be gentle in our behavior, appreciative of all that we've been given, and may we also share it with ever-increasing numbers of people, souls who are wayward because of not having received the memo. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna.